I was standing in my living room when my son walked through the front door at 7:38 p.m. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the clock since the detective told me he was on his way. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They had been earlier that afternoon when the forensic accountant showed me the documents, when I saw my own signature repeated across dozens of papers I'd never signed, when I learned that the son I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, had stolen nearly $2 million from me. But now my hands were steady. The 2 police officers were waiting in my kitchen. The forensic accountant's report sat on my dining room table, 473 pages of evidence. And Michael, my only child, had no idea that his entire world was about to collapse. He smiled when he saw me. Actually smiled. "Hey, Mom, you feeling okay? You look pale." I looked at the face of my son and I wondered when exactly I'd stopped knowing him at all. My name is Diane Foster. I'm 71 years old, and until 8 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. A widow, a mother, a woman who'd worked hard her entire life and had something to show for it. I taught elementary school for 37 years in Scottsdale, Arizona. My husband Richard was a civil engineer. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We saved, we planned, we built a life. Richard died 4 years ago, sudden heart attack at 68. One moment he was laughing at something on the television, the next moment he was gone. They say you never really prepare for that kind of loss, and they're right. The grief was suffocating. But I had Michael, my son, my 39-year-old boy who lived just 20 minutes away. He'd always been attentive, but after Richard died, Michael became my rock. He called every day, visited 3 times a week, helped me manage the bills because, honestly, Richard had always handled the finances, and I was overwhelmed. Michael would bring dinner. We'd eat together. He'd sort through the mail with me, explain what needed to be paid, what forms needed signing. He was patient, kind, everything a grieving mother could ask for. I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake. After Richard died, I inherited everything. Our home, worth about $600,000. Richard's life insurance, another $400,000. His retirement accounts, investment portfolio. Together, it came to roughly $1.8 million. It wasn't a fortune, but it was security. It meant I'd never be a burden to anyone. It meant I could age with dignity. It meant freedom. Michael had always been good with numbers. He worked in real estate development, or at least that's what he told me. He'd had some rough patches over the years. A divorce when he was 32 that left him financially strained. He'd called me crying when Jennifer, his ex-wife, filed the papers. I'd helped him with the lawyer fees. Then there were business ventures that didn't work out, a restaurant partnership that went bankrupt, an investment in a tech startup that folded. Each time he'd bounce back. Each time I'd been there to help if he needed it. Sometimes a few thousand here, a loan there. He always said he'd pay me back. He never did, but I never asked. He was my son. But he always landed on his feet eventually. After the divorce, after the business failures, he'd find a way forward. He was resilient, charming. He could talk to anyone, make them believe in him. I wanted to believe in him too. Our relationship had always been close, especially after his father died. When Michael was young, Richard worked long hours, engineering projects that took him away for weeks at a time. I was the one who raised Michael day to day. I was the one at the parent-teacher conferences, the baseball games, the school plays. We had a bond, Michael and I, or at least I thought we did. About 6 months after Richard's funeral, Michael sat me down at my kitchen table. He had that serious look, the one he'd get when he was trying to be grown up even as a child. I remember he was wearing a suit that day. He looked professional, successful. "Mom, we need to talk about protecting your assets," he said. He had spreadsheets, printed articles about estate planning. With estate taxes the way they are, you could lose 40% of everything when you die. But if we set up some trusts, transfer some property into different ownership structures, we can protect it, make sure it's there for me and eventually my kids. He didn't have kids, But I thought maybe someday he would, and the idea of the government taking 40% of what Richard and I had worked for, that made me sick. What would I need to do? I asked. Just sign some documents. I'll handle everything else. I've been working with an estate attorney. It's all legitimate, all legal. You won't have to worry about a thing. I signed papers that night, and then I signed more papers the next month, and the month after that. Michael would bring them to dinner, explain them quickly while we ate, and I'd sign where he indicated. He'd say things like, just a transfer document, or refinancing paperwork, or trust restructuring. It all sounded so official, so proper. And I was still deep in grief, still foggy, still just trying to get through each day. I never read them carefully. I trusted him. That was my second mistake. 2 years passed, then 3. Life developed a rhythm. I volunteered at the library. I had my book club, my neighbors, my small circle of friends. Michael continued to visit. He'd take me to doctor's appointments, help me with technology when my computer acted up. We'd celebrate holidays together. But I started noticing small things. Michael always seemed to have money, new car, expensive watches. He took trips to Hawaii, to Europe. When I'd ask about work, he'd be vague. Real estate's good, Mom. Really good. I thought maybe he'd finally found his stride. I was proud of him. Meanwhile, I lived modestly. My teacher's pension covered my expenses. The house was paid off. I didn't touch the inheritance much because I wanted it to last, wanted it to be there if I ever needed long-term care. That money was my safety net, or so I thought. Last March, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was from a title company in Phoenix. A woman with a pleasant voice asked if I was Diane Foster, owner of a rental property on Camelback Road. I don't own any rental property, I told her. There was a pause. Ma'am, according to our records, you've owned this property for 6 years. We're calling because the tenants are moving out and we need to schedule a final walkthrough. My stomach dropped. There must be some mistake. I only own my home. Let me verify the address we have on file for you, she said. She read my address, my exact address. She even had my date of birth, my social security number, the last 4 digits at least. I told her I'd call her back. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hang up the phone. I sat at my kitchen table for 20 minutes trying to make sense of it. A mistake, I thought. Just a paperwork error. These things happen. Identity theft, maybe. Someone using my information fraudulently. But something about it felt wrong, felt personal. I called Michael. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Honey, I got a strange call about a property I supposedly own. Can you call me back? It's important. He called back 3 hours later. What property? I told him what the title company said. There was a brief silence. Not shock, not confusion. Just a pause, like he was thinking, calculating. Oh, that. Yeah, Mom, remember? We put that in your name for tax purposes. It's part of the estate planning we did. Nothing to worry about. But I don't remember buying a property. You didn't buy it. We transferred it into your name from one of the trusts. It's all legal, all part of the plan. The rental income is helping to pay down some of the estate obligations. We talked about this. Had we? I tried to remember. Those first years after Richard died were such a blur. But surely I'd remember buying real estate. Surely. Can you come over? I'd like you to explain this to me. Show me the documents. I'm out of town for work, Mom. I'll come by when I'm back next week, I promise. Everything's fine. This is all part of protecting your assets. You signed all the paperwork. Don't you remember? His tone was so patient, so reassuring, like he was talking to a child. He sounded so confident, so certain, that I started doubting myself. I don't know, I'm getting old, I guess. You're not old, Mom. You're just stressed. I'll come by next week and walk you through everything, okay? After we hung up, I sat at my table and felt a creeping sense of unease. Something about his tone. Something about the way he'd said, you signed all the paperwork. I went to my home office, to the filing cabinet where I kept important documents. I started pulling out papers, looking for anything about a property on Camelback Road. I found files and files of documents I'd signed, dozens of them, quitclaim deeds, refinancing agreements, transfer documents. I tried to read them, but the legal language was dense and confusing. My signature was on every page, but I couldn't remember signing half of them. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all those papers, all those times Michael had said, "Just sign here, Mom." The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I went behind my son's back. I called Richard's old attorney, Frank Morrison. Frank had retired, but he referred me to a colleague, a woman named Jennifer Chen, who specialized in estate law. "I need someone to look at some documents," I told her. "I think there might be a problem." Jennifer met me at her office that afternoon. I brought everything, all the files from my cabinet. She spread them across her conference table and started reading. I watched her face. At first, she was neutral, professional. But as she worked through the papers, her expression changed. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed. After 2 hours, she looked up at me. "Mrs. Foster, who prepared these documents?" "My son. He said he was working with an estate attorney." "Did you ever meet this attorney?" I realized I hadn't. No, Michael handled everything. Jennifer picked up one of the quitclaim deeds. "This document transferred ownership of your home to your son. Do you remember doing that?" The room started spinning. "What?" "According to this, signed 3 years ago, you gave your house to Michael. It's in his name now." "But I live here. I pay the property tax." "The property tax bills are probably still coming in your name because of how the transfer was recorded. But legally, Michael owns this house." She picked up another document. "This one transferred a commercial property into your name, then immediately took out a mortgage against it in your name. This one refinanced your original home before the transfer, pulling out equity." My chest felt tight. "I don't understand." Jennifer's voice was gentle but firm. "Mrs. Foster, I think your son has been committing fraud, extensive fraud. These signatures—" She held up several papers. "Some of them don't look quite right, and the pattern of transactions is classic financial exploitation. He's been using your identity and your assets to acquire property, take out loans, and enrich himself." I couldn't breathe. "How much?" "I'd need a forensic accountant to tell you for certain, but based on what I'm seeing here, we could be talking about more than $1 million. The room was silent except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. My son, my child, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd trusted with everything. "What do I do?" I whispered. Jennifer leaned forward. "First, we get a forensic accountant. We need to know exactly what he's done. Then we need to decide whether to involve law enforcement. This isn't just civil fraud, Mrs. Foster. If he forged your signature, if he knowingly stole from you, this is criminal." Jennifer recommended a forensic accountant named David Park. He'd worked on financial elder abuse cases before. He knew what to look for. I hired him that week. The retainer was $15,000. I paid it from one of the few accounts Michael hadn't touched. David worked fast. He requested bank statements going back 8 years, property records, loan documents, credit reports. He interviewed me for hours, asking what I remembered signing, what Michael had told me, how the arrangement worked. The truth emerged like a horror movie playing out in spreadsheets and property records. Michael had begun shortly after Richard died. The first property was a duplex in Tempe. He'd forged my signature on the purchase documents, used my credit to get the loan, and kept the rental income for himself, $1,500 a month, for 6 years. Money that should have been mine. Over the next 2 years, he'd acquired 2 more properties the same way, all in my name, all with mortgages I didn't know existed. One was a condo in downtown Phoenix. Another was a small commercial building. The tenants paid rent to an LLC Michael controlled. I never saw a penny. Then he'd refinanced my house, pulling out $250,000 in equity. I never saw that money. It went into an account I didn't have access to. He used it as a down payment on another property, this one commercial, a small office building in Tempe. He put that in my name too, took out a business loan against it for another $300,000. The properties themselves were worth about $1.2 million, but they carried mortgages totaling nearly $800,000, and I was responsible for every penny. Meanwhile, Michael had transferred the original deed of my house into his name. If I died tomorrow, he'd inherit my home free and clear, while my estate would be left holding hundreds of thousands in debt from properties I'd never wanted and didn't even know about. David's report was 473 pages. I sat in his office as he walked me through it. Page after page of evidence, forged signatures, and David showed me how they differed slightly from my real signature. Subtle variations Michael thought no one would notice. Fraudulent loan applications where Michael had listed my income as 3 times what it actually was. Falsified bank statements. Property transfers I never authorized. Mortgages taken out in my name while I slept. It was sophisticated, calculated, methodical. This wasn't a desperate mistake made in a moment of weakness. This was 8 years of deliberate, systematic theft. Every dinner we shared, he was planning the next move. Every time he told me he loved me, he was calculating what else he could take. The total? When you factored in the stolen equity from my home, the rental income he'd kept, the fraudulent loans, and the property values, Michael had stolen approximately $1.9 million from me. Everything. He'd taken everything. I sat in David's office when he showed me the final report. I thought I'd cry. I thought I'd scream. I thought I'd fall apart. But instead, I just felt cold, empty. Like someone had reached inside me and pulled out everything that made me human. Everything that made me trust. Everything that made me love. How could he do this? I asked. Not really to David, just to the universe, to God, to anyone who might have an answer. Financial exploitation of elderly parents is more common than people think, David said quietly. The perpetrator almost always justifies it to themselves. They tell themselves they deserve it, or that they'll pay it back someday, or that you won't need the money anyway. They tell themselves, you'll die soon, and it would have been theirs eventually. That last part hit me like a physical blow. He was waiting for me to die. Possibly. Or he thought he'd have time to fix it before you found out. Either way, he made a calculated decision that his wants were more important than your security. I stared at the papers spread across David's desk. My life reduced to evidence. My trust, quantified in dollar amounts and forged signatures. I gave him everything. When he was struggling, I helped him. When his marriage ended, I was there. When his businesses failed, I never made him feel like a failure. I loved him unconditionally. That's what made you vulnerable, David said. Unconditional love, trust. Those are supposed to be good things, beautiful things. He weaponized them. That's not your fault, Mrs. Foster. That's his. I went home that night and looked at the photos on my walls. Michael as a baby, red-faced and screaming, minutes after birth. I remembered that day so clearly. The joy, the overwhelming love. That tiny, perfect human who needed me for everything. Michael as a toddler, chocolate smeared across his face, laughing. I'd taken that photo at his 3rd birthday party. Michael at 10 holding his first-place spelling bee trophy. He'd been so proud, I'd been proud of him. Michael at his high school graduation. At his wedding to Jennifer, both of them young and hopeful. I'd paid for that wedding. $15,000. A gift, not a loan. All these moments. All this history. All this love. And somewhere along the way, the boy in those photos had become someone I didn't know. Someone who could smile at me over dinner while robbing me blind. Someone who could fake concern while I grieved for Richard, all the while planning how to exploit that grief. I cried that night. Not soft tears, gut-wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep inside. I cried for the son I thought I had. I cried for the trust that was broken. I cried for myself, for the years I'd lost, for the security I'd thought I had. But when the sun came up the next morning, I was done crying. Jennifer called me the next morning. I have David's report. Diane, this is ironclad. We have him dead to rights. The question is what you want to do about it. What are my options? Civil suit. We can sue him for the money, try to force him to return the properties, undo the transfers. It'll take years and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees. You might win, but collecting could be difficult if he's spent the money or hidden assets. Or we involve law enforcement. What he did is forgery, identity theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. These are felonies, multiple felonies. If the district attorney prosecutes, he could face significant prison time. My son, in prison. I tried to imagine it. Part of me recoiled, but another part, a part I didn't know existed, felt something else, something harder. If I press charges, what happens to me? To my assets? The properties in your name would likely be seized as evidence. Eventually, with the fraud proven, you could petition to have the mortgages declared fraudulent and discharged. Your home could be transferred back to you. It's complicated, but you'd have a strong case for making yourself whole again. How long would it take? 2 years, maybe 3. But Diane, I need you to understand something. If you do this, if you press charges, you're destroying your son's life. He'll have a criminal record. He might go to prison. Your relationship will never recover. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the last 4 years, all those dinners, all those times he'd looked me in the eye and lied, all those signatures he'd forged while I grieved for my husband. He'd calculated every move. He'd watched me suffer and seen an opportunity. He'd counted on my love, my grief, my trust, and he'd weaponized all of it. Something shifted in me then, a kind of clarity I'd never experienced. My son had made his choice. Now I was making mine. Yes, I said. My voice didn't waver. I'm prepared. Do it. I called the Scottsdale Police Department that afternoon. They transferred me to the Financial Crimes Unit. I spoke with Detective Sarah Ramirez. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Mrs. Foster, can you come to the station? I'd like to take your full statement. I drove there the next morning. I brought David's report. Jennifer came with me. We sat in an interview room for 4 hours. Detective Ramirez went through every detail. She was thorough, professional. She didn't show emotion, but I could tell she was angry on my behalf. This is one of the most extensive cases of elder fraud I've seen, she said. The premeditation here, the length of time, the amount stolen. Mrs. Foster, I'm going to be honest with you. If we pursue this, your son is looking at multiple felony counts. He could face 15 to 20 years. Jennifer squeezed my hand. I took a breath. What do you need from me? I need you to be certain. Once we arrest him, once this starts, there's no going back. Your son will know you're the one who turned him in. Are you ready for that? I thought about my life, about Richard, who'd worked until his heart gave out, about all those years I'd spent teaching, shaping young minds, trying to make the world a little better, about the future I'd planned, the security I thought I had. Michael had taken it all, not because he needed it, not because I'd failed him, but because he could, because I was convenient, because I trusted him. I'm ready, I said. Detective Ramirez nodded. Then let's bring him in. They couldn't arrest Michael on the street or at work. Too public, too much risk he'd run. Detective Ramirez wanted to bring him in quietly. She asked if I could get him to come to my house. Can you call him? Tell him you need to talk about something important. Don't give details. Act normal. I called Michael that evening. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. Hey, sweetheart, he answered. What's up? I need to talk to you about something. Can you come by tonight? Is everything okay? You sound weird. I'm fine. I just need to see you. Around 7:30? There was a pause. Sure, Mom. I'll be there. Detective Ramirez and another officer, Detective Chen, arrived at my house at 6 p.m. They went over the plan. Michael would come in. I'd be in the living room. Once he was inside, I'd signal them. They'd come out and arrest him. Try to keep him calm, Detective Ramirez said. Don't confront him about the fraud. We don't want this to escalate. The two detectives went to my kitchen. We left the door open a crack so they could hear. I sat in my living room and waited. I looked at the clock. 6:30, 7, 7:15. I thought about calling it off. He was still my son, but then I thought about those forged signatures. I thought about how he'd smiled at me over dinner while robbing me blind. I thought about what my life would look like if I did nothing. Broke, possibly homeless, beholden to him for everything while he owned the house I'd built with Richard. No. I stayed in my chair and watched the clock. 7:38. The doorbell rang. I stood. My legs were steady. I walked to the door, my hand on the knob, and I took one last breath before opening it. Michael stood there with a grocery bag. I brought Chinese food, figured we could eat while we talk. He looked so normal. Jeans and a polo shirt, clean shaven, that easy smile, the same smile he'd given me 1,000 times. I could smell the food, something with garlic. How many times had he stood in this doorway? How many times had I been grateful to see him? "Come in," I said. He walked past me into the living room, set the bag on the coffee table, started unpacking containers. "So, what did you want to talk about? You sounded stressed on the phone." I looked at him, really looked at him, searched his face for any sign of guilt, any indication that he knew what he'd done was wrong. I saw nothing, just casual confidence. "Michael," I said quietly, "I need to tell you something." The kitchen door opened. Detective Ramirez and Detective Chen walked out, badges visible. Michael's face changed. The smile dropped. His eyes went wide. "What? What's going on?" Detective Ramirez stepped forward. "Michael Foster, you're under arrest for forgery, identity theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." She began reading him his rights, while Detective Chen moved behind him with handcuffs. Michael stared at me. "Mom? What is this?" I looked at my son. "I know everything, all the properties, all the forgeries, all of it." His expression shifted. Confusion became panic, became anger. "You're having me arrested? Are you serious? You stole from me for 8 years. You stole everything." "I didn't steal anything." His voice rose. "Those properties were investments. I was managing your money. You forged my signature. You knew what you were signing." Detective Chen was putting the handcuffs on him now. Michael jerked away. "Get off me. Mom, tell them you knew." "I didn't know," I said. My voice was calm, clear. "You lied to me. You used my grief. You stole my home." "This is insane," he was yelling now. "I'm your son. I took care of you. I was there when Dad died, and this is how you repay me." Repay him. The words hung in the air, as if his kindness had been a transaction, as if being there for your grieving mother entitled you to rob her blind. "Michael," Detective Ramirez said firmly, "you need to calm down." "She's confused," he shouted. "She's old. She doesn't understand what she's doing." That's when something inside me hardened completely. He was still trying to manipulate, still trying to use my age, my supposed weakness to escape consequences. "I understand perfectly," I said. "You're a thief, you're a liar, and you're not my son anymore." His face went pale. For a moment, he looked like he might cry. Then the anger returned. "You'll regret this. You're going to lose everything anyway. Those properties have mortgages. You think you can manage that? You can't even use your own cell. Phone without help." Detective Ramirez pulled him toward the door. "That's enough. Mom, please." His voice broke. "Don't do this. We can fix this. I'll pay you back. I promise." I turned away. I couldn't look at him anymore. I heard the front door open, heard him still pleading, then yelling, then nothing. The door closed. He was gone. I stood in my living room in the house that wasn't technically mine, and I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt tired. So incredibly tired. Detective Ramirez came back in alone. "Are you all right?" "I don't know." I said honestly. She put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. What happens next won't be easy, but you did the right thing. The trial happened 6 months later. The intervening months were their own kind of hell. Michael was out on bail. He tried calling me, texting me. He showed up at my house once. I called the police and they escorted him away. My attorney got a restraining order. He hired an expensive defense team. I don't know where he got the money, but I suspected it was my money, somehow. Everything was my money, ultimately. Michael pleaded not guilty. His attorney argued that everything had been a misunderstanding, that I'd known about the property transfers, that this was simply an estate planning strategy gone wrong. They tried to paint me as confused, elderly, mentally compromised. They implied I had dementia, that I couldn't remember giving permission. They put character witnesses on the stand who testified that Michael was a devoted son, attentive, caring. They showed photos of us together at holidays, smiling. They made it sound like I was ungrateful, vindictive, a bitter old woman who'd misunderstood sophisticated financial planning. But David's report destroyed that narrative. The prosecution brought in handwriting experts who testified that dozens of signatures were forgeries. They showed how Michael had practiced copying my signature, how the pressure points and letter formations were slightly off. They presented bank records showing Michael had hidden accounts, offshore LLCs, properties I'd never heard of that he'd purchased with money he'd stolen from me. They showed testimony from title companies and mortgage brokers he'd lied to, telling them I was aware of the transactions, forging documents that claimed I'd appeared in person when I never had. They produced email chains where he'd discussed his strategy with associates. In one email, he'd actually written, "The old lady signs whatever I put in front of her. She has no idea what's happening." The old lady. That's what he'd called me. When I testified, I told the truth. I looked at the jury, 12 people who didn't know me, and I told them everything. About Richard's death, about my grief, about how much I'd trusted my son, about the day I found out. I didn't cry on the stand. I'd cried enough. I just told them the facts. Michael's attorney tried to rattle me on cross-examination. "Mrs. Foster, isn't it true you have trouble remembering things?" "I remember perfectly well that I didn't sign those documents," I said. "But you signed many documents with your son, correct?" "I signed documents he showed me, documents he lied about, documents that weren't what he claimed they were." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison. With good behavior, he might serve 8. He's in a state facility outside Phoenix now. He sent me letters. I haven't opened them. The properties were seized. With Jennifer's help, we proved the mortgages were fraudulent, obtained through forged documents. 2 of them were discharged entirely. One I had to settle for 30 cents on the dollar. My home was transferred back into my name. It took almost 2 years, but I got most of it back. Not all. The legal fees were substantial, the emotional cost higher still. But I survived. I'm 72 now. I still live in my house in Scottsdale. I still volunteer at the library. My book club meets every Wednesday. I see my friends. I take walks in the evenings when the desert air cools. My life looks almost the same from the outside. But something is different inside me. I'm stronger than I thought, more resilient. I learned that love and trust are precious things, and when someone violates them, you have to be willing to protect yourself, even if it costs you everything, even if it's your own child. People ask if I regret it, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The truth is, some nights I lie awake and think about Michael as a little boy. I remember teaching him to ride a bike, helping him with homework, holding him when he cried. That boy existed once. But the man who stole from me made his own choices. I couldn't let him destroy me, and I won't apologize for surviving. I'm still here, still standing, still living in my home, the one Richard and I built together, the one I almost lost. Michael took 8 years of my life, nearly $2 million, and any illusions I had about unconditional trust. But he didn't take me. He didn't win. At 72, I learned that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. And I learned that I'm stronger than anyone, including myself, ever knew. That's not just enough. That's everything.